Hello and welcome to the 42nd video in this series for beginners programming in C. So now we've had a look at structures and pointers to structures, we're going to move on to looking at something called linked lists. And in quite a few of the books I own on C and C++, all of them approach linked list, in my opinion, in a sort of apprehensive way. They try and give you the impression that linked lists are difficult, and if you read in forums about questions from people learning C about linked lists and how they work, the answers are always, I think, very, very complicated. And actually linked lists are really, really simple and very, very useful. In fact, the first time I came across linked lists was without reading about them in a book. I'd actually found that in a game I'd implemented linked lists on my own anyway, and then when I came to read about linked lists in a chapter, having heard they're a thing that you absolutely need to know and understand very well, I realized I'd already implemented something like that because it was a functionality I needed. And it's also really where pointers come into their own as well. So we're going to set up in this video a small program that's going to be used then converted to use linked lists. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a program that takes this defined structure here that's called a racing car, and the racing car has a name and a speed, and we've defined up to 8 characters here for the name, and I've typed def so that we can use this as its type alias. And what we're going to do in this video is just write, and there'll be some copy and paste in this, a program which allows the user to enter racing cars and then print the list of racing cars to the screen. So when we think about how we might go about that, you'll realise straight away that we're going to need an array of racing cars. But the question is going to be, well, how many racing cars do we want in our array? So let's say that we're going to allow the user to store up to 4. So here we'll enter a constant int, and we'll call this integer max cars, and we'll call it 4, so that we know that the user has at least can enter up to 4 cars. So now in the main function we can declare our car array, call it all cars, and we can enter the number of cars as max cars. So we've got space now for up to 4 cars. And as the user enters cars, we'll need to keep track of how many cars the user has entered. So we'll make an integer called number of cars, or num cars, and set that to 0 because we have 0 cars at the moment inside our array. Now the functionality I want to do in our program is a loop where the user types add to add a car, types print to print the car list, or types quit to actually quit. So just up here we're going to now make a function to print the list, so we'll call this void and print list, and for now all we're going to do as a placeholder is we're going to put a printf in here saying list print like this, just to put a placeholder for now, because we'll call it because I'm going to compile the code halfway through to check that everything looks all right. And I'm just going to copy and paste this below here, and I'm going to call this one here add car, and again I'm just going to put add car in here to check that's everything all right. We'll be changing shortly the return value for this function. So now what we need to do is we need to do our classic while loop, which is going to be our input loop for our input from the user. And the way we're going to do this, take this input from the user, is a slightly safer way than we've been doing previously. We're going to use fgets to store the input into a character array, and then we're going to run scanf on this character array and store that in command. So what we're going to do is we're going to use fgets, taking in 15 characters, and I'm going through this quickly because you've seen all this before and I actually want to get round to eventually getting onto the linked list part. So from the standard input, the console will take into our input array 15 characters, and then we're going to say, depending on what the user entered, we'll do our appropriate action. So the first thing we need to do is take the first string that the user has entered, or the string that the user has entered in input, and put that into our command. And now we can do some analysis of our command to see what the user has actually entered. And now I'm just going to scroll up a little bit because I'm running quite far down the screen here. So the first one we've got is compare a certain number of characters, and we've got 4 because it's quit, and if quit is entered then we're going to break. I'm going to type an else here and then lazily copy this to here, take out this break, And this time we're going to call inside here our print function, because we're going to say this is going to print the list. So we'll type print in here, and now we're comparing with 5 characters, and we'll call our print list function. And otherwise we'll analyze 3 characters for add, so a 3 here, and we'll call this then add car. And that should now be the basics of our working program. I'm just going to compile that to make sure there aren't too many glaring typing errors or anything inside there. And indeed, if I run this now and type add, we have add car, print, we have list print, and quit. We have quit. We're breaking. Good. So far so good. So now to implement a little bit of the actual adding of cars into our array inside the add car function. So when we're going to add a car, the way we need to do it is we need to ask the user for some more input, and we're going to need to ask the user for therefore a character array of input, and we're going to use then scanf in a certain format to make this quick, to get the name and the speed of the car, and then store these in our array. So we're going to change the return value now of add car to an integer. And basically what's this going to do? It's going to return 1 if we actually manage to add the car, or 0 if something went wrong in the process of adding the car. And what we're going to need now is we're going to need a pointer to the car at the position in the array that we're going to be adding the car. So the car that we're going to be filling the details in is this car here, and this will be taken from this array, which you'll see when we call the function inside main. So I can now take this printf off that's asking for the add car, and let's change this now and say enter name and speed, and we'll put a colon and take off the new line. And now we need to make an input character array, and we'll give 16 characters here. And the assumption, just for simple use in our program, is the user is going to enter the name, then a space, and then the speed, and the name will have no spaces to keep things as quick as possible. So we'll type fgetS and take in 15 of the 16 characters to throw for a termination character on the end, and we'll take these from the standard input. So we've now should have read in our name and then our speed. And now what we can do is we can now make a little sentinel. We'll set to 0, and this OK will be set to 1 if everything was read in correctly. So what we can do now is we can say that the result is, and we'll use scanf like this, as we're familiar with. And now we're going to scan from our input, and now we're going to enter the format we're expecting. So we're expecting a string with no spaces and then a number for the speed. And we're going to then store these, and this is the important part, in car name, and the address of that, it's already effectively a pointer because this is an array. And then because we've now got an integer of the speed, then we say we're going to put this in the address of where this pointer is pointing to and store the speed like this that we read in for this placeholder %d here. So we read into our car pointer now the name that the user entered and the speed. And the point of having this result here is if the user entered a string with no spaces and then the speed, and it didn't take up more space than we had available here, then the res here, or the result, will be a 2. So we can say now that if our result is equal to 2, then, I'll just put an else here now, then the first thing we can do is set OK is equal to 1. And now we can do a printf, and I'm just going to do a quick bit of copy and paste here to speed this up because I've already been going for nearly 10 minutes. We go to printf and say that we've added the car name with the speed, and otherwise we can just say there's an error passing the input, and then we can return OK. So what remains to be done inside main for this section then, and the last little bit of this video, is what we can say down here now is that the number of cars, and we can say is incremented by the result of add car. But of course we need to send in a pointer to our car that we actually want to add. So we need to send in the address of where we're actually adding the car. Well, we're adding the car at somewhere in our all cars array, and we're adding that obviously at the index of the current number of cars. So when we first start, the index is 0. So it'll make a pointer to the car at index 0 in the all cars array, and that's what will have this data then filled in by the add car function. And then number of cars, if it was entered correctly, will be incremented by 1. And the only other thing we need to do here is to say that if the number of cars entered is less than our max cars, then we can actually add. Otherwise we have to print some kind of warning to the screen to say, sorry, we can't do that, the list is full. Like this. So I'm just going to save this now and compile this and test that it's okay, at least in adding cars. So I'll just compile, and it compiled and run. And now let's type add, and let's just type Ford and 10. And there you go, you can see it's added Ford and 10. So let's type add very quickly, and I'm just going to do some nonsensical stuff here to get this going quickly. So we're adding car number 3 here. And let's add car number 4 here. And now it should stop us adding any more cars. And indeed it's saying now, sorry, the list is full. Okay then, good. So that's it for this video. That's set up our basic program reading cars into our structure. In the next video we'll finish off this little program by actually printing the car list, and then we can start looking at why we might need to use a linked list here rather than an array of car structures like this. So thanks very much for watching. Comments, questions, criticisms welcome as always on YouTube.